Hello and welcome to the Moonshots Podcast. It's episode 23 and I'm your co-host Mike Parsons. And as usual, the man with a plan, the man himself, I am joined by Mr. Chad Owen.
Hey there, Mike. We've got episode 23 here.
Can you believe it, man?
Yeah, it's really great. And I'm really excited to hopefully jump right into today's topic, really following up on the previous show that we've beamed out live to the internets on Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook. We've got his right-hand woman, Sheryl Sandberg, who's been COO for 10 or 11 years now, right?
Yeah, and I have to say, she's a real powerhouse. Not only is she incredibly accomplished as an executive with time at both Google and Facebook, but she's also a co-author of two pretty epic books. And I think most companies in the whole entire universe would love to have her as a CEO. Yet she chooses to be second in command at Facebook, which says a lot about her, don't you think, Chad?
Yeah. And I also just found out that she's on the board of Disney, which is kind of another fanboy company of ours.
Right. But think about it, Chad. So she went to Harvard. How did she do there? She was top of the class. Then she just went, first gig, the World Bank. And then she's like, you know what, maybe I'll head over to Treasury now. Then she's off to Google and Facebook. Oh, you know what? I'm worth over $1 billion. I've done all these great things. Probably need to write a few books now. And both of them bestsellers. I mean, it is prolific and just incredibly inspiring.
Yeah. And there's so much that we can learn from her. And I'm glad you brought the books up because we have two really interesting kind of like book trailer clips almost that introduce the books. And the first one, I'm sure most, or I hope all of our listeners and watchers have heard of this book, Lean In. And essentially, she's really brought the conversation about equality in the workforce to the forefront. And I think really helped kickstart kind of a national conversation around that. And so here is her little book trailer for Lean In.
I entered the workforce believing that my generation was going to have equal responsibility and equal opportunity. And it didn't work out that way. Women are getting more college degrees, more graduate degrees, entering the workforce at every level. But in industry after industry, women are at 18, 15, 20% of the top jobs. Women are held back by many things. We're held back by bias, by lack of flexibility, by lack of opportunity. We also hold ourselves back. We don't sit at the table. We don't raise our hands. We don't let our voices be loud enough. I remember my first day at Facebook, driving to this new job and this hard job and not being sure I could do it. I think about all the moments when I just didn't believe in myself. Every test I was sure I was about to fail. Every job I wasn't sure I could do. It was after watching so many women quietly lean back, after watching myself quietly lean back and miss opportunities, that I started to see the pattern and started to talk about it. Why does this matter? Boy, it matters a lot because no one gets to the corner office by sitting on the side, not at the table. This book's for women of all ages, young girls who are thinking about what their futures might be, people who might be out of the workforce thinking about coming back, or even someone who's a volunteer and wants to lean in and take on more leadership. To encourage women to really believe in themselves and believe in their dreams, and to help men do their part to form a more equal world by making sure that all of us have opportunities based on our passions and interests, not just based on our gender. Part of what I'm hoping Lean In will do is really start a conversation in every workplace, in every company, in every school, to start thinking about gender differently. I believe the world would be a better place if half our companies and half our countries were run by women and half our homes were run by men. This is about believing in yourself.
There you go. Like, what I love about her approach is it's something that is like not only inspiring to women, but I think for everyone, I think we can all learn, like, you only get places in life if you lean in, if you actually really have a go. And I actually think that if you look at all the other entrepreneurs and innovators, Chad, that we've had on this show, without a doubt, the story of that binds them all is that they're all leaning in, don't you think? Like every one of them is 100%. They're all in. They're not hesitating. They're not doubting themselves. In fact, that courage is sort of crucial to success.
Yeah, but I think what's unique to her and also I think Oprah is they're much more at least outspoken about this idea of work-life balance, which I don't know that I believe in or not, but both of them speak about the intentionality of what you're doing. Right. And I think that is what I take away most from this message of leaning in is to question the status quo in whatever position, status, race, gender, sexuality you are. We can have that larger conversation about how to create more opportunities for everyone just simply by recognizing, like by calling it out and then working actively towards making it better. Yeah. And, that all starts with kind of a personal journey before we can kind of have to help ourselves before we can help everyone else in a way.
Right. And I'll go like even a step further with this. If I look at things that I've done in life, both work and in life in general, if I look at entrepreneurs in general, I think those that succeed are able to overcome the fear of the unknown, to overcome their doubts. So I find this a great reminder to myself that often when I'm doing something new, you'll sit there and go, oh, I don't know if this is going to work. Should I really try this? And what Sheryl's message does is it reminds me that if you're going to do something, you have to be all in. You have to really go for it. And what's interesting from an entrepreneurial lens is I think a lot of people have dreams of creating a business or creating an idea, but it's their doubts that hold them back from having a go. So just overcoming those doubts and actually putting your best foot forward and being all in, I think is something that we can all take from Sheryl's idea in Lean In, don't you think?
Yeah. And a big message, I think, too, is creating the community around yourself and getting that support network that can allow you to do that. I think you're absolutely right in that a lot of what scares us from undertaking these entrepreneurial ventures and risks is sometimes we don't have a safety net or we don't feel like we have a safety net. I think a big core message of what she talks about in Lean In is, be sure that you have a partner that will support you and not just pat you on the back and say, oh, go get them, but actually, put in the hard work and the time and be there for you, when you stumble and when you fall. And so I think that's another interesting message is that kind of like we can't do it alone or we don't think that we can do it alone. And we're maybe a little bit stronger than we think we are.
Yeah. And I think another thing that she does building on that, which is very similar to a number of other great innovators that we've decoded, is she's not scared to talk about failure. She's not scared to talk about, I don't know, the awkward things, the hard things in life. And I think that's really important because once you can be with a group of people and admit, hey, you know what, I'm really unsure about something, the crazy thing is that everyone else will kind of go, you know what, I'm not that confident about that either. And actually then you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe it's actually not that bad a thing. Maybe we can think of some ideas. And I think it's that frankness that she has in her first book to call out her own concerns. I think this is key to this idea of learning. She's going to be vulnerable. She's going to share the idea, talk about it. And what's really powerful is she sort of touched on to a very controversial topic, but she just totally embraced it like, hey, I'm facing a challenge. Others are facing this challenge. Let's talk about it. And if you thought she did a good job talking about equality in the workforce and women leaning in, dude, like her next book, she just went next level on sharing vulnerabilities and really talking to some really tricky topics. And you've just got to admire her courage, her strength just to even talk about this stuff.
Yeah. And so the book that Mike's talking about is Option B that she co-authored with Adam Grant. And so I'll actually just play the book trailer for that to give you a sense for both, it's kind of like a doubling down on many of the themes that she talked about in Lean In, but on a much more personal level.
2 years ago, I lost my husband, Dave, unexpectedly, which is an unimaginable thing to live through. It felt like I was sucked into a void, like I couldn't quite breathe or think. I didn't think I was going to get through it. And I was even more worried about getting my children through it. I could barely get through it myself, let alone get my 2 children through this.
We can't control what happens to us, but we do have some influence over how we respond to the events and hardships in our lives.
What Adam gave me were specific things I could do.
We wanted to write a book that would combine her insights with the best evidence, but also with other people's stories.
We all face challenges, and some of them are big and huge and traumatic, and some of them are the daily challenges, but we need resilience for all of it.
Resilience is not a fixed personality trait. It's a lifelong project.
A few weeks after Dave died, there was a father-son activity. Our friend Phil and I were talking about who should do it. I said, okay, well, that's good, but I want Dave to go with our son. And he said, option A is not available. So let's just kick the shit out of option B.
Woohoo! She's rocking out there. She is she is not going to take a back seat. She's going to get on with life. All power to her, huh?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I got like a little emotional there listening to that, because that's not a story that you hear from anyone, even a family, close family member, let alone, someone who's running a multi-billion-dollar company.
Exactly. And don't you find, though, that a lot of the great entrepreneurs and innovators have some ability to share things, what I think of like the internal conversations, that the sort of conversation that happens in your head, they're able to get that out there. And I think surely one of the things that we can learn from Sheryl here is that, so often we don't want to appear weak or vulnerable. But I would have to say, if you look at her track record and success, you'd have to say she's making a great case for being more open and more vulnerable as a way to okay, this is where I'm at. And, she was talking to a friend and he said to her, option A is not available, so you have to go for option B. And this led her to huge progress in her personal life. She then talked to Adam Grant, this great author, and they ended up co-authoring a book around this idea. And it all started from this idea of being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. In the hopes of building resiliency.
Yes.
I think that's the outcome that they work towards kind of in the studies and stories that they share in the book. And I found it so refreshing how unautobiographical both of the books are. Someone like Richard Branson, who has 2 autobiographies, there's a lot that we can learn from them, but they have kind of, particular narrative style, and you will only kind of take away specific, and you kind of have to interpret, well, that's what Richard Branson did, but how can I do it for myself? I love how, with the idea of a lean-in circle and some of the practices and kind of questions that you can walk yourself through in option B, there's some really practical things that she's imparting to us from her learnings.
Yeah. And so this is a great opportunity to think about some of, the really powerful ideas she has to offer us. So coming up in the show, we're going to go all through a spectrum of wisdom and ideas from Sheryl. We're going to talk about how to realize your dreams of being great in your career and having a rich and rewarding personal life. She's got some great ideas around education and MBAs. And she's got some great metaphors for life as a marathon. I mean, there's a ton coming up on the show. So I'm really, really looking forward to getting into all of that. I just want to remind everyone, Chad, that they can get all these insights, all the clips, extra links. You can get everything from moonshots.io. So just head there for the show notes. Every single episode we've got indexed and all the links and so forth. But I wanted to ask you, Chad, we've got so many great ideas coming from Sheryl. Where should we start?
Well, the other thing I just wanted to call out is some of you may be watching this live probably a couple weeks before it goes out onto the podcast. So for those of you that just can't wait for the learnings that Mike and I are extracting from these entrepreneurs, be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and you can find, links to our scheduled live shows here and get the scoop before everyone else. And just want to give a shout out to those of you that are watching and listening to us live.
Totally. And I just wanted to say that I've already seen we've got friends and viewers in New York, in Europe, who are tuned into the live stream. That's really, really, really cool. So we got to hit them with some Sheryl wisdom. Chad, what you got?
Yeah. So going back to this idea of Sheryl talking about work-life balance, there's, again, just a new and fresh perspective that I think we haven't heard from other entrepreneurs. So here she is just explaining a little bit more some of her thoughts about that.
No one can have it all. That language is the worst thing that's happened to the women's movement. No one even bothers to apply it to men. It's really pressure on women. I think what happens to women is we compare ourselves at home to the women who are full-time work-at-home mothers, and we fall short. Compared to them, I am falling short every day. And then you can compare yourself at work to men, mostly men, but some women, but mostly men, who have no other responsibilities really. Go home whenever they want, and you can feel bad there too. So we can spend all our time feeling terrible about how we're lousy workers and lousy mothers. And by the way, I do this a lot, all of us do. Or we can start realizing that we can be great mothers. The data on this is super clear that you can be a great and very successful parent with a great relationship with thriving children with less time. And you can be a great worker and a great colleague at work, but not have to be there for 12 hours a day in person. And I think we have to let ourselves do that.
So my big thing here is I relate to this idea so much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, Chad, but when I started my career, when I really made the decision to really work hard and go for it, I got so out of balance. I literally was just working 80, 90 hours a week. I remember turning up to the offices of McCann Erickson in Amsterdam, and I arrived before the cleaners had even started. So I couldn't get in the office. So I think it was 5:45 in the morning, and had this big project and needed to do some work. And I remember sitting in the car park I need to get in. And when I just laugh at myself, I was just so full on, so ridiculous. But in the end, the big learning for me was the healthier I am at home, the healthier and better I am at work. And these things are integrally related. And you are a better person at work when you're a better person in your personal life. I think those things are so linked. I mean, don't you find this such a truth that Sheryl is sharing with us?
Yeah. The most helpful part about what she says for me is the mindset of stop comparing, because that's the little insidious thing inside of our brains that really gets us. Because the reason that we're there so early in the morning and so late is because we know that someone else is, the person that we're competing with maybe a little too much with at work, or we're worried too much about our competitors and what they're doing. And I love the kind of zen-ness of, don't compare yourself. There is a way for you to have your cake and eat it too. We can be more efficient and effective at work so that we can spend less time there, so that we can then reinvest in other places and be better partners and parents and community members. For me, that mindset is really what I'm taking away.
Yes. And you touched on there. It's quality over quantity. It's about making choices about what's the most important thing I can do. And I think Sheryl really has a lot to offer us there. I think what's really interesting in this next clip is she really has a lot to offer us. Be balanced in your life. But when you make a decision to do something, really be all in. And I think what's really great about this next idea from Sheryl is, yes, it applies to women, but I think it also applies to men. It applies to everyone, which is no matter what could be in the future, if you have something that you really want, something that you really like doing, in your career, just go for it. Don't second guess all these variables in the future. So let's have a listen now to Sheryl giving us some inspiration on how to be all in.
You tell women not to leave before they leave. What do you mean by that?
You know, a young woman came to see me at Facebook once, and she started asking me all these questions about how I balanced, kids and work. And she looked kind of young. So I said, do you have a baby? She said, oh, no. I said, well, are you thinking about having a child? She said, oh, no. She started laughing. She said, I just graduated from college. I don't even have a boyfriend.
So what you're saying is women aren't going for opportunities because they're afraid of the work-life balance they'll ultimately face. Yes. So they keep from going for big jobs because they think, gee, if I do a big job, I'll never be able to have a family. And you say, go for the big job and deal with family later?
Yeah, I feel very strongly that all of us have to make these personal decisions when we have that child. You have to decide, are you going to be a work-at-home mom, or you're going to be a work-in-the-office mom? But until then, you should lean in, keep your foot on the gas pedal, because it turns out if you do that, you might get promoted. You might make enough money to afford childcare. You might have a more interesting job. You might get promoted to a level where there's more flexibility.
And you might have the leverage you need to make demands so that your work actually complements your family life.
For me, this clip was all about being present and not getting caught up too far into the future. I think the story of this college-aged woman, fretting over family. I mean, that's a real thing. And I've seen that amongst all kinds of peers,
right.
Both men and women. We kind of get caught up into this future that maybe we think is expected of us, or is, something like that, without taking that time and attention to figure out what is best for us now and in this moment. And to me, this just speaks to Sheryl's ultimate confidence in herself, because she's like, I'll deal with it when I get there, but I'm just going to make the best of things right now. And for me, that is kind of like a quintessential entrepreneurial trait, is that confidence that you're going to commit to what you're doing now, and you'll deal with the problems down the road.
Right.
But you're not going to like try and plan for every contingency and all of these things. It's just like, no, commit to the thing you're doing, and you know that you'll take care of it later. And that's what I love, that kind of fierce quality of that she's bringing out in that clip.
Totally. She's so Lady Gaga right here. Fearless and relentless. Just like she will go for it. And one of the things that's really interesting, Chad, just to explore this a little bit more, is for me, if I look at the pattern in all of the other entrepreneurs and innovators, the place that they source this courage from is, number one, they're solving a big problem in the world. And two, they're deeply, deeply passionate about that problem. They really care about that problem. And I think that is the source of the inner strength. So the reason why a lot of companies fail is that the principles that are involved are not that committed to the idea itself. It's kind of a nice idea. I was with someone, a startup guru yesterday, Chad, and he was telling me this story of like, we were talking about what we see in startups and founders. He was commenting to me on, like, over the Christmas break, how for several weeks, a number of founders went on vacation. Mm-hmm. And we were just having a giggle to ourselves as sort of wise old warriors. We were just like, those guys, they just don't want it enough. They don't really care about the mission they're on, because they all kind of disappeared for 3 weeks. He's like, where did everyone go? Right? My point here is that I think you can have the courage of Sheryl if you're doing something that you really care about, but that thing really matters in the world. I think there's like an abundant energy source there. I think that's how we can all, try and get a little bit of Sheryl's fearlessness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, it just comes down to not getting too obsessed or living too far into the future. And if you're not helping that customer or that person right here and now, then, it's maybe not worth something that it's maybe not worth doing. Yeah. Kind of getting back to you saying, like, you've really got to be solving a problem that's big.
Yeah. And listen, here's the other thing that I think is really helpful for our audience. what's the worst that can happen, honestly? So you try and create a product or a service. You try and tackle a big problem. Well, what's the consequence? If you actually really play out the risks and consequences, they're not nearly as big as you might think that they are. And so I think stop worrying about all those things in the future. Just go out and do things. But that doesn't mean that there's not hard work involved, okay? And I think what's really good about Sheryl is she's totally open and upfront that there's a lot of hard work that it's required to get not only your career going and to get your business going, but also you got to invest in your personal life as well. So we've got this great new clip coming up, and this is Sheryl talking about life and about work really as a marathon. So let's have a listen now to Sheryl Sandberg.
Think of a career, having a career and a family, like having a marathon. Long, grueling, ultimately rewarding. You get to the start line. Men and women, equally trained. You could argue with the educational attainment of women in this country, women are even better trained. But let's say equal, for argument's sake. Marathon starts. The men start running. What do they hear? What are the messages they hear? You've got this. Keep running. You've got this. You can do it. What do the women hear? Much more skeptical. You sure you want to do this? Does it make sense to start a race you may not finish? Don't you want kids one day? The race continues. The messages go on. The cries for the men get louder. You've got this. Keep going. You're going to cross the finish line. The cries for the women get louder too. Should you be working when you have a child at home? Doesn't your child need you?
Yeah, the stark difference, I think it's true. And it's interesting to me how, despite all of the setbacks, like the real setbacks that she and women across the world have in terms of equality, she, when it's come down to it, has stepped up to the plate. And we have a clip coming up too that's her story of negotiating her job at Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg, which I think dovetails really nicely with this clip and how she's responded to the reality of the environment that she faced as she was starting out as a young woman and navigating her career, like you said, in finance and then kind of pivoting towards tech.
Yeah, look, I think let's just get straight into that story. It's so epic and it's so typical Sheryl, isn't it? She's just like, she's open about the doubts and the worries she had. She had her own but then she found her inner strength. So let's just jump straight into Sheryl. And this is how she negotiated with Mark Zuckerberg.
I had been talking to Mark Zuckerberg about becoming Facebook COO for months, and when he finally offered me the job, I felt grateful. I felt lucky to have it. He made me a financial offer, which was excellent. And I was ready to take it. And I was afraid if I negotiated, he wouldn't want me. And he wouldn't like me.
Does that sound familiar? That sounds familiar.
And he wouldn't like me. And I felt ungrateful. It was such a great job. It was such a great compensation package. I should be lucky and grateful and say thank you. And that's what I was about to do. And my husband and my brother-in-law kept saying, negotiate, negotiate, negotiate. And finally, my brother-in-law, in anger, looked at me and said, expletive, Sheryl. Why are you about to take this job and make half of what any man would make? There is no man in the world who takes a job at that level and doesn't negotiate.
So Sheryl, how did you do it? I'm reading the book and I was like, did you make believe you were somebody else when you said it?
Nothing motivated me, right? The money, I just wasn't motivated except by that. I'm like, you're right. I am not making less than some man. No way. No way. And I went back and negotiated. And for 12 hours, Mark walked. And for 12 hours.
No. See, ladies, you have to sometimes walk.
You have to have a stomach for this. But he came back and we actually made a better deal. That was a longer term. It was a better deal. But I also, and my husband said this to me, he said, if you don't negotiate, he won't value you as much. And so, and this is interesting. I want to be clear about this. When I tell women to lean in and negotiate, I am not saying and have never said, we do it the way men do it, because you know what? That doesn't work. So you cannot just demand more money or lean in, meaning say whatever you want. We have videos on our website for free, leanin.org, on how to negotiate. And with men, they can negotiate because everyone expects them to advocate for themselves. They can just say, I'm worth more, and it's fine. If a woman did that, it's a very bad result. So as a woman, you have to tie that into what's good for the other side. Again, communal. So what I said to Mark, and this was before I did the research on my book, so I got lucky that I got this right, but this is what the research shows, and this is what Lean In is trying to systematically teach everyone, is I said, you realize you're hiring me to lead your negotiating teams. So this is the only time we'll ever be on the other side of the table, and I'm going to bring these skills to my job at Facebook. I know you would be disappointed if I didn't show you I had these skills.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's such a great story to me because she's really just advocating for everyone to ask for what they're worth because they're providing value. So of course she says, you know, you have to figure out what the communal value is and what you're bringing to the table, but then you have to speak up. And that's where what a lot of us don't do is voice it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what was really great about that technique that we can all learn from is like, in those circumstances, if you want to hire me, you would expect me to negotiate fair value. Just like when I become an executive at the company, you want me to do my transactions where there's fair value for both parties. That's how you create a thriving business. So I think this was great. And again, what you notice is her candor. And I think that if you look at what we can take out of this first set of ideas that we get from Sheryl, it's like being kind of a little bit frank and honest about what's really bothering you or your deeper concerns and worries. Because if you get them out there with somebody you can trust, of course, that's the start of you conquering them. And being stuck in your mind going, you know, this is not a path to getting on top of the concern, right?
Yeah. And I don't know if this is like maybe too much of a stretch here, but what I'm pulling out of this first section is in the way that we've talked about getting, products and services and ideas out in front of customers. Sheryl's actually kind of starting upstream of that and is like, communicate your worth and value and desires and ideas and emotions with your teammates and with your company, because that is the only way that you can refine your ideas, be sure that everyone's being heard, etc. And so there's this kind of idea of like this openness and transparency and vulnerability about communications. I think that's really interesting. It's kind of like the same method just applied in a different realm.
Yes. So what I think we're getting to is you've got sort of these two books from Sheryl, right? And the first one, Lean In, is really about not fearing, doubting, and just leaning into your dreams and your passions and going for it. But part of that, I think, which is essential to her message, is this idea of fair value. You know, you're creating value, you should be valued for that. Now, I think there's so much in that, whether you are working inside a large organization, whether you're a founder who's taking care of people in your team, to make sure that you are recognizing and valuing them, all of them, every single one, regardless of any type characteristic that they might have. But what's really interesting, I think, is that beyond this idea of leaning in, what I really love is that along the way, there are going to be setbacks. Along the way, there are going to be, sometimes in Sheryl's case, terrible situations where her husband passes away. Now, overcoming that and finding the resilience to overcome that, this is not just for the few people that lose their partners. I mean, let's be honest. We all go through our own hero's journey. We all face challenges. Maybe they haven't even come yet in life for us and for our listeners. But I think the key thing here is to be resilient. And the pattern that ties the two books together is she's really candid and open about her feelings. She looks to others to help her get through them. And what's really, I think you can see why she's such a wonderful an inspiring person, is that she shares this with the world in order to help others overcome the challenges that she's faced. And this kind of gives her this enormous presence, not only in Silicon Valley, but I think far, far beyond that. She's almost like an Oprah in waiting. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think you could argue that the reach of Lean In, rivals someone like Oprah, who has been standing for that kind of empowerment and working towards it for a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And no surprise that Oprah and her hang out a bunch. Like Sheryl's always doing shows with her. And I mean, they're like, what a dynamic duo. Imagine that. Sheryl and Oprah in the same room. That's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. What if they wrote a book together? That would be interesting.
God. Oh my gosh. Well, it would be a bestseller, that's for sure. Now, we've learnt a ton already from Sheryl, Chad. We've got 2 great book recommendations, Lean In, Option B. We'll have links to those in the show notes, so we're good to go. Before we get into more Sheryl, we should remind everyone we got some big things happening, and we should talk a little bit about our next European tour.
Yeah, well, 14 days from now, 2 weeks, we'll be in Bucharest, Romania, broadcasting live, bringing you the learnings from 3 Eastern European entrepreneurs that have been in the trenches, and we'll be sharing their learnings and thoughts on growing and scaling companies and some of the challenges that they face. And I'm excited to do my second live show from Europe with you, Mike. It's really refreshing for me, the different perspectives.
Yeah, totally. I love the different perspectives. But the funniest thing is you're in New York and I'm in Sydney, but we always do our live broadcasts in Europe. What's with that?
It's close, right?
It's the halfway point. Is that the?
Yeah, not really.
Yeah, but you're right. On the next Moonshots show, we'll share with you some of our guests. They are, total A-player guest list for the show. 3 amazing entrepreneurs, and Sheryl will be proud of us. We've got a great female Romanian entrepreneur. That's going to be really exciting. I can also tell you that the tickets for the event are moving like hotcakes. So the show is going to be packed with lots of cool people ready to learn wisdom and find inspiration from entrepreneurs all around the world. So can't wait for that. If you want any more information about that show, just go to moonshots.io and you will find everything you need there. But now we go from Europe and we come back to Sheryl in Silicon Valley. What's next for our inspiration and learning, Chad?
Well, I picked up Lean In off my wife's nightstand because I was interested in what Sheryl had to say to people like ourselves. Privileged white men. And I think this next clip from her really just summarizes some of her best thoughts on how we can be supportive of that entire movement.
What is Lean In's message to men?
I'm so glad you asked, because I think the least understood thing about my book is that people think it's a book for women, and it's not. It's a book for all of us. And if we're going to get to equality in the workforce, where men have 86% of the top jobs, men are going to have to be a huge part of that equation. The book has 4 main messages for men. The first is help women sit at the table, help women reach for opportunities. The second is to really push back on the success and likability gap. The third is let's have the honest conversation about mentorship and sponsorship no one's having. And the fourth is we need to actually help women navigate through the child-rearing years.
Yeah, look, my inspiration from this goes just to the idea that the most thriving businesses I've ever been part of, the best teams I've ever been part of, a really big theme there is that everyone feels appreciated, everyone feels respected, and the business goes out of the way to see that person succeeds. And sometimes you've got to help them out with things that are happening at home in order for them to be successful at work. And what this just reminds me of is we got to do a good job. We've really got to make sure that the underlying conditions for a great team and a great business is this sense of well-being, because when people feel happy, healthy, and safe at work, they'll crush it. They absolutely crush it. And this is the inspiration that I get from her, which is sort of this universal truth of take good care of people and they'll take good care of the business.
Yeah, I would add being sure that people feel heard.
Right.
I think that's a lot of what Sheryl's calling out here as well, being sure that everyone is at the table and everyone gets a voice.
Yeah.
It sounds really simple, but I know that you and I have seen it, and most of our listeners have seen this, where the highest paid person, in the room talks 90% of the time and no one else is ever heard. I think being sure to be as supportive of everyone and be sure that all of those voices are heard is really important. And then, of course, the kind of Alibaba Jack Ma philosophy of, if we just keep our people happy and healthy, then that pretty much takes care of itself. And that's, like you said, across all areas of their life. And so in the specific case of Lean In, and what Sheryl Sandberg is saying is that how can we be sure that families aren't reliant so much upon this kind of expected labor of women? How can companies be more supportive? How can partners be more supportive in that environment?
Yeah, this idea of, taking care of people, there's such a good business case for it, Chad. So this is how I always try and think about it. If you just invest a little bit more time, effort, maybe money, but you do that to take good care of your people, then this engenders such goodwill from them to the company. Right? The employees think, these folks are taking good care of me. And then what happens is you get things like dedication, hard work, and loyalty is what you get in return. And go beyond that.
And it's so hard to put a price or value on that for companies.
Well, but even if you think about it in this kind of terms of price, if a good person leaves a company, right? Or even someone that has potential, hasn't quite got there yet, but they leave, the cost of the downtime of you lose the person, you have to find someone, recruiting costs you a lot of money. Then you have to train the new person. The cost is epic. So if you're thinking there like, I probably need to invest $5,000 just to do this thing for someone. If you think about the business case, if they're worth it, if they're working hard and they've got this great potential to offer to the company, it's the most sound investment strategy ever, because if you lose them, the raw cost to the company is so huge, it's totally worth taking good care of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just the right thing to do.
Right.
I mean, it's just simply the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love that Sheryl's calling this equality between men and women out, because that is the reality, which is 84% of top positions are filled by men. And again, it's kind of because of this assumed way that we think the world's supposed to be. Right. But I think it starts with all of us individually, especially people like, ourselves that are working in fast moving progressive environments, that we need to take a long, hard look at these kinds of things and just be sure that we're being supportive of everyone and not just kind of catering to the needs of our little bubble.
Yes. It's such a good point. And I think that often what happens is people, in their quest to make progress, the analogy I would use, they become like bulls in a china shop, right? They just charge along and they forget to listen to others and take others along with them. But here's another thing. You mentioned like assumptions about how we think the world should be. And actually, Sheryl will challenge us in a completely different area about an assumption that we all think is like a prerequisite to do great in business. So here's the interesting thing. Sheryl, went to, I think, roughly speaking, the best university on the planet, right?
Arguably, I would say the University of Chicago is, but I'll let that slide, Mike.
Okay, we have to let it slide with me too, because I went to the University of Life. I lasted all of 7 weeks in college, so let's not even go there. But check this out. So she goes to arguably one of the leading colleges on the planet. Hey, Chad, how did she do there? Like, how were her marks?
Top in her class.
Yeah. Yet, here's the interesting thing that she did publicly. She challenged the notion of whether we need MBAs, whether we need to even go to college to work in the modern tech sector. So let's have a listen now. This is really interesting. These are some Bloomberg host freaking out about what Sheryl had to say about the role of college in our modern work careers.
Facebook Sheryl Sandberg thinks that business school is not necessary or even useful for people who want to work in technology. In a post on the question and answer website Quora, the Harvard grad wrote, quote, "While I got great value from my experience, MBAs are not necessary at Facebook, and I don't believe they are important for working in the tech industry."
Sheryl Sandberg went to Harvard. She got her MBA in 1995. Here she is essentially telling the world, don't do that. You know, if you want to be the next me or the kind of next tech star, you don't need an MBA. What we're looking for are skills and the ability to solve problems. And she compared her ideal hire to an athlete that she can cross-train. And so that sort of just means, you know, you have to be good, period. This isn't about degrees and it's not about education. She went as far as to say an MBA is good for some people in some situations, which is not a ringing endorsement.
No, it's not a ringing endorsement at all. But I agree with her. I agree with her 100%.
Yeah.
Right. And you're living testament, right? You don't even need a degree. Look at where you are, Mike.
No. well, the funny thing is I never even think about, oh my gosh, I feel so inadequate. I don't have this degree. Now, I do want to say this. The role of universities and colleges to inspire us to think, right? Mm-hmm. To inspire us on learning how to learn. I cannot think of a more important thing on the planet, okay? So let me get that clear. I spend a lot of time on tools like Coursera, Udemy. In fact, I probably have watched the Yale Economic Theory program from start to finish. It's the guy, you know, the Schiller Home Index, the famous thing about the prices going up in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. Well, I've actually listened to his lectures several times because I love this content. So it just wasn't for me at the time. College wasn't the path. But here's the thing that I think what Sheryl is really challenging us to be is how do we be that cross-training athlete ready with skills and ready to learn a multitude of different things, this sort of I immediately conjure this more agile, ninja-like professional rather than this very academic executive. And I think that's the contrast between sort of the industrial age and the technology age that we live in. When you hear this cross-training athlete, what image comes to your mind about what kind of executives we need to be?
It all comes down to like adaptability and responsiveness.
Yeah, totally.
I think that needs to be rolled out across the entire organization. And I think she's absolutely right. The individuals that can adapt to market forces, what the customer needs, all of those things are vitally important to keep companies building things that people actually want. And like while a degree from a university may be an indicator that someone is able to learn, it can backfire, and maybe they're too set in their ways and they stand behind that degree of like, well, I'm smart because I have the degree, not I'm smart because I know how to learn, I know how to adapt, I can take in new information and think for myself, which I also would argue is the true purpose of higher education and learning.
Right.
And that is the kind of education that I did get at the University of Chicago.
Yeah.
But I've never had to pull out my degree, and I've never felt like that is where the value came from. It really is. It comes back to the theme of learning how to learn.
Yeah,
you know, I was fortunate to go to university to learn how to learn. And now I'm learning from all the entrepreneurs that that's what you need to learn how to do. And it's like, okay, great. So I made one, good decision when I was a young and then, but that is what I get out of the cross training, is that you need to be able to learn how to learn and learn quickly and adapt. And that is kind of the highest value indicator.
Yeah, it's totally the highest form. And I would say what we can take out of this is that, don't rest on your laurels in terms of what you know and your expertise. After I had spent more than a decade on Madison Avenue working for these big ad agencies, and I had the good fortune of going all around the world doing that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to totally go back to school and reboot. And I took a job where for the first time, I hadn't been like the CEO for like 4 or 5 gigs, right? Mm-hmm. 2, I went from marketing to product and got into the world of innovation. And this was sort of my university degree. This was my 4 hard years of college, which was totally learning a whole new universe. And I think we've got to be prepared to do this a lot more than what would have traditionally been expected. You'd get your certifications from college, and then you'd make a nice career with maybe some gentle pivots. I think what we're all doing, much like you did, you were like going one direction, the direction that was certainly by no means storytelling. Mm-mm. And then you had this aha moment, didn't you? You just went and woof, and you went and pivoted into a whole new world. And maybe you'll have 2, 3, 4 more pivots in your life. So for me,
I hope so.
Yeah. And so just embracing this and, as you said, learning how to learn. I think this is the essential juice that we can all take from this. Don't stop learning. And you know what's interesting? How many of the people have we seen that we've decoded and listened to on our show? How many of them put this constant learning? Like, look at Bill Gates. The guy allocates 2 hours a day to be learning new things.
Yeah. It's probably 19 or 20 out of the 23 right. or 22. Yeah. And I think this directly relates to this next clip we have of her talking about how to hire. I know that is a big question for most, if not all, entrepreneurs, how important those first and early hires are. And I think this just builds on her idea of, hiring cross-train athletes as, being adaptable people that can help you succeed into the future. So here's Sheryl talking about thinking big and hiring right.
I think the most important thing about growing a business successfully is thinking ahead about where you're going to be. And when you're trying to really scale an organization, you need to go really quickly and get people to accomplish more than they thought was possible. And I think that comes from internal motivation, which really comes from a vision that's big enough. I think the second thing is you have to hire big. And big, I don't mean famous. I mean ahead of where you are. So when you're growing an organization really quickly, what happens is that what normally takes an organization years happens in a period of just months. So when I was at Google, my team went from 4 to 4,000 in about 5 years. That means that if you look at those first 4 people I hired, in order for them to be part of the people who are running that organization, they need to do about, 10 or 15 years worth of growing and, getting experience in a much shorter period of time. So if you think you're going to grow quickly, hire for what you think you're going to need. Overhire. Hire people who are more qualified, have more experience, or hire people who are right out of school but can overachieve in their current roles. I don't think it's a number of years in the workforce that matters. I think it's hiring the people that you're going to need now, because then happens so quickly.
Wow. I cannot tell you how important this idea of hiring big, hiring for tomorrow and not today. I have seen so many businesses almost strangled by the fact that they underhire, right? So what they do is they think, okay, we've got to really manage the budget. Oh my gosh, let's try and get someone, let's really try and get them on the smallest compensation possible. Let's get someone a little bit junior, right? She's saying, do the opposite. And here's what I've seen a bunch of times. When companies dare to believe in the people they hire and overhire, they create so much value. They create so much well-being within the organization because they're competent. They can work more autonomously. They communicate well. They're maybe overperforming their station. Mm-hmm. This creates so much momentum and it creates growth. Whereas companies that are under hiring, they're hiring for yesterday, are struggling because they don't work efficiently. The people are not capable of performing the tasks that they're being given, which is very unfair to the employee, by the way. And what happens is you start to see issues that there's low customer satisfaction, low customer advocacy, there's high churn rate of staff within the organization. I love what she's saying because a lot of founders in startups, and this is particularly for all our listeners who are in startups, you think you're doing the business a service by underhiring or getting people that are much more affordable, people you can pay less, but this hurts the business. This end up costing you so much more in the future. So I just think that the big learning we have from Sheryl here is hire up, hire big, hire for tomorrow, and it's a gamble. It's a risk worth taking, don't you think, Chad?
Yeah. Part of me kind of gets caught up in my own thought experiment, like the whole chicken and egg. Well, I don't have enough money to hire people, but I can't create value without the right people. So I agree with her sentiment. I think for what I would love to know is kind of how you can do that in practice. And certainly I think this applies to companies that have secured funding, that have a defined runway or some stable cash flow. For some of the more scrappy entrepreneurs of us out there, it may be a little harder to figure out how to put that into practice. But I definitely agree with her sentiment of hire someone that's out of school but that you can train to overperform in their current role because you know that they can become your COO or something to that effect. And thinking 5 or 10 years into the future, like someone like Jack Ma does when they're hiring.
Sure.
Hire the person that you want to be your boss in 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. But also you don't, in this modern world, it doesn't have to make them an employee. You can partner with a really great freelancer or contractor or, partner expert. Like, this isn't about just hiring people. In the modern age, you might find a freelance guru and you might be working on this project, overhire for this project because maybe they make this project so good that the next project is bigger and bolder and so forth. So I think it can be not only hire big, partner big, associate big. And, this reminds me of that wisdom that you should always surround yourself with people that are better than you, raise the game around you. So I think it's not only hires, it's not only partners, just hang out with people that excite you with the things they talk about, who challenge you, who push you to be better.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that idea of partnering.
Yeah.
And yeah, also finding those mentors and role models that are already living in that future so that you can ask them, oh, hey, in your business, what are your needs right now?
Yeah.
Because I know that that's actually what I need to be hiring for and working towards now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what's interesting is this all starts to come a bit 360 when you think about the system of ideas that she's got for us. Don't fear, lean in. You're going to face challenges along the way. This is classic hero's journey, and she's really setting us up to take risks, to follow our dreams, to pursue our ambitions. I think much like both Oprah and many other of the absolute gurus of innovation that we've decoded, it's a pretty complete operating system to be successful that she's offering us. I find this just gets me really fired up about think big, dream big, and just go out and do it, right?
Yeah, and we've got a great clip to end on where she speaks about just that.
I do believe that women don't take enough risk. Not every woman, certainly some do, but same thing. The men are just foot on the gas pedal, career motivated. The data tells very clearly that at every stage, starting in college, in the high educated part of our workforce, men are more ambitious than women. And I really believe we're not going to close the achievement gap until we close the ambition gap. And so the ambition gap has to do with risk. I think the most common mistake I see people make, and men make this mistake too, but women do a lot, is they're too worried about the upward trajectory and not worried enough about growth. So the 2 corporate jobs I've taken, I went from Treasury to Google, and then I went from Google to Facebook, had one thing in common, which is that they were more junior, other people's words, not mine, than other jobs I was offered. When I went to Google, Google was like 250 people. I was going to be a business unit general manager, except there were no business units. Susan Wojcicki's here. She helped recruit me. This was the non-job of all time. I mean, there was no job there. And I was offered like senior sounding, more senior roles at more established companies. But I really believed in what Google was doing. And Eric Schmidt gave me great career advice. He said, go for growth. Growth moves everyone up. It's growing, it works. And so I went to a smaller company with a very more junior, less defined job. You know, when I came out of Google, it seems obvious now to come to Facebook. But at the time, a lot of people asked me, right? You remember this. What are you doing? You're going to work for a 23-year-old, you know? No one knows if Facebook's going to be the next, you know, MySpace or Friendster. Like, and you're not CEO. You could be CEO somewhere else. And what I saw was something that mattered. Facebook mattered with authentic identity and an opportunity for growth. And so at each stage, I've cared less about my level. I kind of think it's silly than I have about the underlying growth. And I do think this is really important for everyone to know, particularly women.
Go for growth, huh? Well, I mean, and isn't it hilarious, Chad? She's like, oh, you know, when I was going to Google, everyone's like, what are you doing? Or when I was going to Facebook, everyone's like, what are you doing that for? And with the benefit of hindsight, you're like, oh my gosh, that was like a no-brainer.
Yeah, but she went to Google in 2001 when they only had 250 employees, and she went to Facebook in 2007.
Yeah.
You know, they'd only been in existence for 3 years. So she certainly bet on the right horses there. She starts the clip off, you know, giving an important message to the women in the audience, but I think you can extrapolate it to everyone in that really what we're doing as entrepreneurs is managing risk. I don't think entrepreneurs just take risks. I actually think an entrepreneur's job is to manage risk, and great entrepreneurs manage that risk the best.
Yes.
And so I love that she's talking about that, because I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs think about it in that way. People think entrepreneurship, even our fellow entrepreneurs think that it's like, oh, well, we just have a great idea and we go and we do it. But I think that the core of it is, you know, managing that risk of bringing that thing into the world, but pairing it with that big ambition and tying that ambition to growth.
Yeah.
I think is really great kind of thread that she has woven into that journey that you're talking about, that we go on as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I really think that she goes for growth, and this is something that we can all do. And because she is really tuned in to what she really wants to do in life, because she has the courage to make these steps, those at the time risky bets on Facebook and Google, still so funny to think about that being risky, right? It's this inner purpose that helps her get across the line. It's this being vulnerable with friends, getting that support to really do things with the benefit of hindsight that looks so brilliant, right? So damn brilliant. And I think that this is such a great reminder for us. Sheryl is teaching us, be vulnerable and open with the people you trust. She's reminding us to dream big and have the courage to just do it. It's like a Nike ad. She's like, just do it. Stop worrying and just do it, right?
Yeah. I know I say this after every show, but it's just the intertwined universe of innovators and entrepreneurs is really just fascinating. And each new person that we bring into the fold always adds so much and also reinforces everything that we've learned. And so I think the biggest lessons that I took away from digging into what Sheryl has been saying is you need to build up that inner confidence to go after that thing that you really want to do. Right. And part of that is creating the right environment for yourself and being that environment for others. And then this last clip, go for growth and go after that thing that you really want and raise your ambition.
That's so true. Well said. Well said. So we've learned so much from Sheryl. I mean, just to think that we've done a show on Mark Zuckerberg, a show on Sheryl Sandberg. That's the number one, number two executives at Facebook. In reflection, you kind of look at that and go, my gosh, Facebook is in good shape. It's in good hands. Like, this will be a company that's going to go places, right?
I hope so.
Like, you just like
I hope with the two of them that they can do something great.
Yeah. I'd be worried if they didn't. Now, listen, Chad, obviously everyone can pick up all of our show notes from moonshots.io. They can get all the goodies there. If you want to find us on any channel, just start with moonshots.io and you'll find us. I want to also quickly remind everyone, we've got the live show coming up. Now, let's just give people a date. That's March 17, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
I thought it was...
Look at us. Okay. When are we actually doing these shows?
The 15th.
Is it 15th?
Right?
Oh, it could be, yeah. Because yes, it's the 15th. 15th for Europe and the US. That will end up being the 18th for all my friends here in Sydney, Australia. We'll be doing a live show. There's going to be a massive audience. We're going to have 3 great guests. On the next show, I think we can reveal who our guests are going to be. You will be delighted to learn more about these guys. But talking about learning from great innovators, I think we're going to sneak in one more show before we head to Europe.
Yeah, I'm tapped out for ideas. It was my idea for the Mark Sheryl 1-2 punch. So I'm going to look to you, Mike, for inspiration for the next show.
Okay. Well, so we've had a bit of a Facebook deep dive. Before that, we did our design deep dive. By the way, got lots of positive feedback about the design series, Chad. People were loving that. I'm looking at the list, and I think there's 2 routes to go. Actually, there's a couple. We've certainly got other Silicon Valley gurus. We've got Mark, the founder of Salesforce, Reed, the founder of Netflix. We've still got the big Steve Jobs out there on the list we got to get to sometime. But what could be interesting is we've just done a double duo of, Zuckerberg and Sandberg from Facebook. Are you feeling maybe we could do another double and do
see where you're going here.
Larry Page and Sergey Brin?
Yeah.
That could be very interesting.
Yeah. No, I love it. And, kind of reaching back into Sheryl's previous life too.
Right. Yeah. She was very instrumental there. And what's really cool about them, they also had another renowned female entrepreneur, obviously Marissa Mayer. So there's a lot going on there. So we've got potentially, we could go on that Google route and then follow that up after the live show, maybe even do Marissa Mayer when we return from Europe.
I think you just planned out the next month of production for us, Mike. That sounds great.
I love it when a plan comes together. Okay. Look, Chad, what a great show. Thank you to you. Thank you to all the people that have been chatting with me on Facebook as they watch the live broadcast. That's been super. I have just got a friend who I think lives in Hong Kong these days, has just logged into the show from Hong Kong. So we're getting all 4 parts of the global continent, which is really, really exciting. Did you enjoy the Sheryl Sandberg lessons and the wisdom and inspiration, Chad?
Yeah. I'm showing up every week, Mike, because there's just so much to learn. Yeah. And I just wanted to say thanks again to all of our watchers and listeners. And keep sending us your feedback.
Yeah, we love to hear from everyone. hello@moonshots.io is our email. Jump on the Facebook. Basically, just go anywhere and you'll find us there under the Moonshots Podcast. I've learned a ton from this. I'm all fired up to step up and really just go for it after doing this Sheryl show. And I'm really looking forward to doing Larry and Sergey from Google. It's another great founder's story. Super smart guys. So much to learn from those guys.
And a live show too.
Oh my gosh. It's actually, are we going to sleep, Chad? Is there actually going to be any sleep in between all of this?
No, we don't need no stinking sleep. No sleep till Brooklyn. Right?
There you go. Beastie Boys. Yeah. It was really funny. One of our listeners from the show, great friend of mine, I was having lunch with, and he's like, Mike, how do you do all of this? And I'm starting to see, I'm asking the same question myself. I'm asking the same question. Look, Chad, thank you ever so much. Thank you to all of our listeners. I hope you're going to have a great evening in Brooklyn. Are you going to kick back and cook up a storm with the missus?
Nope, she's out of town for work, so I'm going to sit back, relax, and watch a movie for once.
Hey, there you go. That sounds awesome. Well, on that note, I want to say thank you to you, Chad. Thank you to all our listeners. It's been great to learn more, to be inspired, and we look forward to seeing you next week on the Moonshots Podcast. That's a wrap.